Sandy will offer his insightful and engaging review of the year and expectations for the economy and financial markets in 2011. Sandy is Senior Vice President and Investment Strategist for M&I Wealth in Milwaukee, a firm with $35 billion in assets under management. He was formerly Chief Investment Strategist for Wayne Hummer, an investment subsidiary of Wintrust Financial. Sandy has appeared on CNBC, CNN, WGN, and Bloomberg, and is a contributor to the Nightly Business Report on PBS. Sandy has been quoted in the Wall Street Journal, Investors, Business Daily, and Forbes, and is a contributing author to many industry publications. Welcome, Sandy.
Okay, is that working? Yes? Excellent. How is everybody? How was the food? Yeah. I decided not to eat because otherwise you'd be able to tell by my tie, my shirt, all that stuff. Well, what she didn't tell you, of course, is I'm a native Chicagoan. I was born on the south side of Chicago, so that reveals that I am a... Feedback already. Yeah, I'm a White Sox fan. That's right. And I grew up on the south side because my mom was actually going to graduate school at the University of Chicago, getting her master's degree in library science. And my dad was a research chemist, so it was kind of a weird breakfast table. And I love baseball. Baseball was my sport. I would love to play baseball. Is the microphone okay? Sounds really loud. It's not. It's okay. Okay. So I used to love to play baseball, and I played all the way through high school, a little bit into college. And I can remember, I was about 10 or 11, I was coming from a Little League game, had a really good day, a Saturday afternoon, and walked in the house. And my mom's sitting in the recliner, and she's reading the chair, and it's by J.D. Salinger. The book is called Catcher in the Rye. You all know that book, right? So I had this great big smile on my face, and it's such a good day. I see my mom reading that book, and I said, "Hey, Mom, when you're done with that book, can I read it? Because I'd really love to read a good baseball book." And she looked at me and she said, "You know, I don't think library science is going to be for you." And my mom and dad were very opposite in a lot of ways, and one of them relates to today's presentation. They were very opposite about the stock market. My dad grew up as a teenager and a young adult during the Depression. And my mom grew up obviously in the same period. They were born in 1915 and 1916 respectively. And so they lived through that Depression. My dad was very fearful of the stock market as a result. My mom, for some reason, had a very optimistic view of things and didn't feel the same way. But in 1956, when my grandfather passed away, who was a very well-regarded surgeon, he left my father in 1956 a $250,000 stock portfolio. Now, all you mathematicians should be doing at 8% a year compounded. Why is Sandy here? My kids have made that calculation and kind of rubbed it, but here's what my dad did. He didn't like the stock market, so guess what he did with that $250,000? He sold every single stock out of that portfolio, and he invested it extremely conservative. In fact, foolishly conservative. 50% went in the vault. 25% went into the equivalent of CDs. And at the time of his death in 1991, we couldn't find the other 25%. And I had my kids who were about 10 and 12 when my dad died. And they were in my dad's chemistry library, which was filled with organic and inorganic chemistry books and my grandfather's medical books. And they were in there for like 2 hours, quiet as church mice. I'm talking to my mom about where could this money be. And I walk in after a couple of hours thinking I got child geniuses reading these books, right? They were capitalist pigs. Guess what was in the books? Money. $100 bills. So that was my dad's investment philosophy. So my mom gets some money in 1991. If you know your stock market history, this was a great time to be investing in the stock market starting about then. She was 75 years old. She went 75% in the stock market. By 2000, she had already nearly tripled her money by the year 2000. So there's, quote, the little old librarian plugging away in the stock market. She loved CNBC. She even loved watching Kramer. Can you believe that? When I went on CNBC for the first time, my mother was she was a loving woman, but very sarcastic. So I came home after being on CNBC, and I did fine. Everything had a fine appearance. There was a message light on that showed how long ago it was, and I picked it up and listened to it. It's my mom. She said, "Dear son, saw you on CNBC today. Living proof there's nothing good to watch on television." Like, okay. And then she ended it by saying, "See you Sunday for pot roast." But they're sort of the opposite view. And today I find investors to be very much like that. I find investors to be sort of torn. Are things getting better, or are we about to go back and re-experience some very difficult times that we've just lived through? And there's a lot of that give and take, yin and yang, half empty, half full, I'm positive, I'm not so positive kind of attitude that's out there. What we're going to do today, it looks like each and every one of you has a private screen assigned to you. I'm waiting for a basketball game to come on at any moment. In order to set the stage here, we call this the global growth divide. And you can see a bunch of country flags going from Japan indicating really slower growth, but hopefully some growth. The next flag you may or may not recognize. It's the flag for the European Union and the 17, now 18 countries that belong to the European Union. Great Britain, the United States, then we go to Brazil, India, and China. And that's a continuum of growth rates of economic environments around the globe. From lower growth, Japan, all the way to very rapid growth going on in China. But let me just give you a little bit of template here. If we took all the countries of the world, 182 countries that are big enough to have measurable economic output, 182 countries, the output of those countries is $60 trillion of goods and services a year. So if somebody says to you at a cocktail party, and you want to get out early, just start throwing this statistic around. Do you happen to know that the global economy has $60 trillion of goods and services for output? That's the total. These countries that you see here, including the region of European Union, produce 50 trillion of that 60 trillion. Okay, so this is where the epicenter really lies, is in these countries, all right? And what we're experiencing right now is that if you look at the United States, for example, we're just a shade around $15 trillion in size of 60 trillion. We're 1/4 of the total world economic output. Really important. China, the second largest, is $5 trillion. Okay? They are growing much more rapidly than the U.S. We'll talk about that. If we then go to Japan, they're nearly $5 trillion. So between just 3 countries, you have 25 of the $60 trillion. So how a few regions or countries do is extremely important. Now, unfortunately, to give you my market outlook, I have to go back and talk about the shoulders on which we stand. And unfortunately, the shoulders, the foundation on which we stand, includes 2008, 2009, which were really ugly for good portions of those years. And we need to kind of revisit that to make sure that we get a little bit of look as to exactly what that was telling us as we went through those 3 years. And for those who don't recall it, I'll just refresh our memories. I'll try and make this journey not too painful and not too long, but we do need to kind of remember how bad this thing was. The economic decline was unbelievably sudden, unbelievably dramatic, and totally global. Whether you were in Kankakee or Kuala Lumpur, you felt it directly or indirectly in your life, in your corporate life, in your institutional life, your government life, your individual life, friends, family, relatives, whatever it might be. Everybody felt it. And the rate of economic decline happened very quickly. This is one from each of 3 major areas of the world. We've got the United States here, Germany, and China. Look at that growth rate for China. It went from growing at 13%. This is the end of 2007. So that's the time period we're at, into the early part and through the year of 2008. And their growth rate goes from 13% to 4%. Almost like that. The U.S. goes from a 4% growth rate to a negative 6%. So on a $14 trillion economy at that time, what's that number? Anybody? 6% of 14, approximately? $800 billion. How much stimulus did the U.S. government put into our economy? $800 billion. Okay. So huge contraction. Germany goes negative as well. So it was a really difficult period, and the stock market, of course, picked up that ugly aroma and smelled it getting bad, and look what it did to the stock markets. It didn't matter whether you own small stocks or big stocks, U.S. stocks, Chinese stocks. Everybody's off anywhere between 55 and 60%. It was just dramatic. So if you had an all-equity portfolio, you had $100 in it, you woke up in a very short period of time with only 40 cents on the dollar out of your original 100 that you had in the stock market. So stocks got, guess what held up?